Hello everyone, my name is Slade, I'll be your host, and welcome to Star Wars Did You Know? In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Executor-class Star Dreadnought, or more specifically the individual ships within the class. Now before we begin, it should be noted I am not looking at the class as a whole. I am not looking to do a class breakdown. There are plenty of Executor-class starship videos out there that break down the class, its armament, its capabilities. This rather is a focus on each individual ship within the class, and their histories in brief. Obviously there are cases like the Executor, which could be a multi-stage, multi-hour dive into its history and all the nuances, both within the Expanded Universe canon and the Disney Canon. However, this is going to be a brief overview of each individual ship within both the Expanded Universe and the Disney Canon. And there's surprisingly very little overlap between those two, with the exception of the Executor and one or two other starships. The Expanded Universe and Disney Canon have almost completely distinct starships when it comes to their superstar destroyers. And we're going to start this off by addressing the elephant in the room, the Superclass Star Destroyer. This does not exist. This is actually a false term that was created to mislead the Senate that were monitoring the budget of the Imperial Navy. The Superclass was a paper ship only. It existed only in blueprints and was designed to mislead the Senate in terms of the actual cost of the Executor class as a whole. However, the Rebel Alliance and others got their hands on this paper design, and that is how the term Superclass or Super Star Destroyer came to percolate so massively throughout the galaxy, even though the proper term is Executor class Star Dreadnought. And having said that the term Superstar Destroyer is completely erroneous, we are now going to discuss the Superstar Destroyer prototype. This is an expanded universe item. It is the prototype, obviously as the name implies, of the Executor class, and it was part of an operation called Project Sarlacc, which was designed, as mentioned, to create a scaled-down version of the Executor class as a kind of proof of concept. It was 12 kilometers long, had less armament, but ultimately was completed. However, it was destroyed by rebels who were able to infiltrate it and detonate its reactor during the Battle of Biss in 17 BBY. Next up, we have two ships from the Disney Canon. These are the Star Dreadnought Assault Prototype and the Star Dreadnought Command Prototype. Now, it is unclear exactly how big these ships are, as there is zero information on their stats. It's not clear if they're similar in size to the Sarlacc Project Super Star Destroyer prototype, which was 12 kilometers long, or if these were the full 19 kilometers, as the later Executor class would be. However, both ships were built to test the systems of the Executor class. Whether or not they were fully armed or operational is entirely unclear. However, they were seen being escorted by Star Destroyers and in construction at various star bases. It's unclear how many of these ships there were. If there was just a command prototype and an assault prototype, perhaps one was testing the systems of the ship itself and the other was testing the weapons. Again, we don't have any real information beyond the fact of knowing they exist. Now we come to the very first true ship of the Executor class. That is the Executor itself. It was the first ship of the class, as mentioned. Upon launch, it became Darth Vader's flagship and the flagship of Death Squadron. It had a distinguished career, some might say horrifying career, considering some of the things it did. However, we're not going to get into the entire history of the ship here, because that would take up almost the entirety of the video. Suffice to say, everyone has seen Return of the Jedi. We know what happens. The ship goes down in a blaze of glory during the Battle of Endor, and is ultimately destroyed. Now, while the Executor itself is in both the Disney Canon and the Expanded Universe, the same is not true for her sister ship. This ship was also initially called the Executor. In fact, both ships were initially christened the Executor. This was an attempt to hide the construction of both vessels, and the reason for that is made evident by this next part. The second Executor was built for Palpatine specifically, and upon its completion, it was never rolled into the Imperial Navy. It was never ever christened into the Imperial Navy. Instead, it was renamed Lusancia, and through some unknown means, Emperor Palpatine buried the ship beneath the surface of Coruscant. Once there, it would serve as the base for a prison, a very infamous prison, which bore the name of the ship, the Lusancia Prison. And this prison would become something of a boogeyman to those who would resist the Empire, as it was a place that prisoners were sent and were never ever seen again, and no one even had any clue where the prison was. However, following the capture of Coruscant by the New Republic, the Lusancia would break free of its tomb beneath the surface of Coruscant City and make a break for the stars, where it would serve as the flagship for Hussein Isard, before ultimately being captured by the New Republic. It would then go on to serve the New Republic up until the Yuuzhan Vong War, were ultimately destroyed in 27 ABY. Now, the next three ships are the second, third, and fourth official ships to be built in the Expanded Universe of the Executor class. We're going to start off with the second ship and work our way down to the fourth, starting off with the Reaper. It was the flagship of Scourge Squadron, and then it was later the flagship of the Pentastar alignment, before becoming the flagship of Admiral Pelion, and then ultimately it was destroyed by the Lusancia, which had been captured by the New Republic, above Selenon in 13 ABY, marking the only time that I know of where two Executor-class ships engaged one another in open combat. Next up we have the Aggressor, which was the flagship of a patrol group that guarded the Imperial's inter-rim territories. Sometime after the Battle of Endor, it was taken command of by Grand Admiral Joseph Grunger, who would use it as the flagship of his own Imperial warlord fiefdom. It was destroyed at the Battle of Tralles, when Grunger would ultimately ram the ship into a torpedo sphere under the command of another Grand Admiral in 5 ABY. Next up, we have the Brawl, or, as it is more infamously known, the Iron Fist. This ship was commissioned as Brawl. However, upon it being gifted as a command to Captain Zinj by Emperor Palpatine, Zinj would go on to rename it the Iron Fist after his very first Star Destroyer command. The Iron Fist would serve as Zinj's flagship throughout his career, both as an Imperial officer and later as a warlord. It would become one of the most dangerous ships to the New Republic as it tried to expand against Zinj's growing warlord fiefdom. Ultimately, though, Iron Fist would be presumed to be destroyed by the Republic before finally being destroyed at the Battle of Dathomir in 8 ABY. Now, going forward on this list, we're going to switch things up. Up until now, we've been going by date of construction, starting with the oldest vessel and going all the way up to the newest. However, for all the vessels past this, we do not have exact dates per se of when they were built. We're going to start off with the Annihilator, or the Liberty's Misrule, which existed both in the Expanded Universe and the Disney Canon. In the Expanded Universe, it was destroyed while fighting the Zahn Consortium in 4 ABY, and that is all the information we have on its career. In the Disney Canon, it was the flagship of Cassio Tag, before being captured by pirates and renamed the Liberty's Misrule. And we don't have any further information on it, unfortunately, although the idea of a pirate-owned Star Dreadnought is interesting to say the least. Next, we have the Arbitrator, again from the Disney Canon, and once more we have very little information on this ship's history. All we know that it was destroyed when it jumped into a black hole in 5 ABY while trying to escape a New Republic task force that was hunting it. Then, also from the Disney Canon, we have the Eclipse. Now, before anyone gets any ideas, it should be noted this is not an Eclipse class. This is an Executor class named the Eclipse, and it served as the flagship of the Emperor. It was believed to be destroyed in 5 ABY by the New Republic. However, it was later discovered adrift and largely intact by Grand Admiral Ray Sloane, who would take command of the vessel and escape into the unknown regions to form the First Order, which means technically the First Order probably has at least one Executor class floating around somewhere. Next up, we're back with the Expanded Universe and the Enforcer, which served as the flagship of the Imperial Second Fleet. It was heavily damaged by Alliance forces at the Battle of Bespin, before later being destroyed while undergoing repairs at the planet Phelan. Next up, still within the Expanded Universe, we have the Guardian, which has the distinction of being the second Executor-class ship to serve with the New Republic. In Imperial service, it was stationed near Coruscant to protect the planet. However, following the Battle of Endor, its commanding officer, Admiral Gain Drommel, took it as his own warship. The ship would be badly damaged at the Battle of Tantive 5. It was later found while it was being repaired by New Republic agents, who sabotaged the hyperdrive and forced it to jump into the midst of a New Republic fleet. There, one of Drommel's own officers would shoot him and then surrender to the New Republic. In New Republic service, the Guardian would initially serve as the flagship of Admiral Akbar, and he would use it in several battles against the Imperial Remnant. The ship would continue to serve the New Republic, going into the Yuuzhan Vong War and beyond, and would actually change hands technically when the New Republic ultimately dissolved and became the Galactic Alliance, serving to protect the leadership of both the New Republic government and the Galactic Alliance government during the war. Continuing on with another Expanded Universe ship, this time the Intimidator, which was the flagship of the Empire's Black Sword Command. It would be captured by a species known as the Yavetha when they threw off their Imperial masters, renaming the ship the Pride of Yavetha, and would become the flagship of their own Black Fleet, which was comprised of multiple captured Imperial starships. However, later, at a critical battle for the Yavetha, Imperial slaves aboard the ship, which had been forced to man it up until now, used slave circuitry to jump the ship into the deep core in the hopes of finding the Empire still intact at the planet Biss. It is unclear exactly what happened to the Intimidator. However, it was later found destroyed and adrift as a hulk in 21 ABY, near the unknown regions of the galaxy, and it is unclear what ultimately happened to their crew or how the ship ended up there after jumping to the deep core. This next ship can be a little confusing because of the name, and I'll try and explain it as best I can. It was christened as the Night Hammer, as in nighttime hammer, but would later be renamed by Admiral Natasi Dalla as the Night Hammer, i.e. Jedi Night Hammer. It would be built by the Imperial Warlord, Superior General Sandor Delvradis. However, after his death, it would be used by Admiral Natasi Dalla. It was a specialized form of the Executor class, being highly automated, reducing the crew requirements significantly, and also being covered in stealth armor, which made it harder to detect. The ship would be destroyed during the Battle of Yavin in 12 ABY, when Callista Ming sabotaged a collection of TIE bomber starfighters and had them fire their concussion missiles into the engine block of the Star Dreadnought in a manner similar to what Anakin did in Episode 1 to the Trade Federation control ship. Crippled and unable to control itself any longer, the Night Hammer would fall into the gas giant of Yavin, where it would be crushed and ultimately destroyed. The next ship is in the Disney Canon, and that would be the Oppressor, which would be destroyed when Rebel saboteurs manipulated its hyperdrive on its maiden voyage, and forced it to jump into the midst of Alliance fleet, where it was attacked and ultimately defeated. Now, the exact details of the ship's destruction are not entirely clear, but it appears that the Oppressor was undermanned and perhaps not fully armed, which was why the Rebel Alliance was able to destroy it relatively easily after its hyperdrive was sabotaged to force it to jump into the middle of the Alliance fleet. Next up is the Ravager, which is another of the Disney Canon Star Dreadnoughts. It was said to be the last of the Empire's superstar destroyers, and it was used to command the Imperial remnants following Endor, and would ultimately be destroyed at the Battle of Jakku, and is in fact the ship we see during Episode 7 that Rey flies through. Now going forwards, all these ships are currently expanded universe only, so unless something changes and Disney reuses one of these names, all the ships following this point are strictly expanded universe. Starting off, we have the Razor's Kiss, which was an Executor class built at Kuat Drive Yards following the Battle of Endor for the Empire. It was hijacked by Warlord Zinj, who was seeking to add a second Star Dreadnought to his fleet in addition to the Iron Fist. However, thanks to a New Republic infiltrator, the ship was successfully ambushed by the New Republic, where it would be self-destructed by Zinj to prevent it from falling into the hands of the New Republic. It would later be rebuilt as the Second Death, which was used to fake the destruction of Iron Fist. Then we have the Terror, which was a unique Executor class in that it had a cloaking device. It was assigned to protect the TIE Phantom project. Its main reactor and the ship itself were destroyed by Rebel saboteurs in 3 ABY. Following on from this, we have a second unidentified Executor class with a cloaking device, possibly a sister ship to the Terror, built at Fondor. This ship as well was destroyed in 3 ABY by a rogue squadron while it was still being built, and it was never ultimately finished or named. Following this, we have the Vengeance, which was the flagship of Task Force Vengeance, and after several skirmishes with Rebel Alliance forces, it was attacked by suicide craft. The Rebel Alliance packed 3 Dreadnought heavy cruisers full of explosives, which rammed into the ship's engine block, followed by a Corellian corvette, which slammed into its bridge, thus crippling the ship. And there are conflicting reports whether or not this ship was also destroyed. It's not entirely clear. It may have just been crippled and later on salvaged or left adrift. However, this all happened during the Battle of Nocto in 3 ABY, regardless of the ultimate outcome. And this means that by my count, in 3 ABY, despite the Battle of Hoth happening, the Rebel Alliance actually did rather well in terms of fighting the Empire, as they lost 3 Executor Star Dreadnoughts in that year. Following on from that, we have the Whelm, which was the flagship of Azure Hammer Command. It defended Sector 0, which included Coruscant. However, it would vanish in 9 ABY from the planet Anaxis, and would later reappear during Operation Shadowhand, before being destroyed in battle with the Mandator 3 Star Dreadnought Panthek. The very last confirmed Executor class we have is unnamed and is simply known as X-1's Executor. It served as the flagship of the Force-sensitive clone X-1's faction of the Empire following the Battle of Endor, and it was destroyed at Mustafar when his brother X-2 used it as a kinetic weapon against the base that his brother had built on the planet Mustafar. And that wraps up all the ships that are definitively known to be Executor-class Star Dreadnoughts. However, there is one more ship that may be an Executor class, and that is the Megador, which was used by the Imperial Remnant. However, it's mentioned that the Megador has additional engines compared to a standard Executor, so whether or not it is a Star Dreadnought of the Executor class like these other ships, or an entirely different ship class, is unknown. It should also be noted that in the Disney canon there are 2 versions of the Executor class, an Executor 1 type and an Executor 2 type, whereas in the expanded universe the entire class, including the ones equipped with cloaking devices and stealth shielding, are all considered to be a single Executor class. Finally, we're going to address something that I myself was puzzling over and what prompted this lore video. How many Executor-class ships were there? Now, I often see people floating around the number 13. Even when I did a Google search, the number 13 was one of the top answers. However, the answer did not reference where this number came from. I have checked both the Disney Canon and the Expanded Universe, and I cannot find an exact number. And so I'm going to give you my list based on the ships I was able to find. This is not including the Super Star Destroyer prototype from Project Sarlacc, or the Star Dreadnought Assault prototype, or the Star Dreadnought Command prototype. In the Expanded Universe, by my count, we have 16 Executor-class Star Dreadnoughts being built. Possibly 17 if the Megador is in fact an Executor class. However, the wiki page as well as various other lore channels all seem to accept the Megador is most likely a separate class of Star Dreadnought. Of these 16, 14 would be built prior to Endor, with 13 of those actually being completed, whereas one would be destroyed before it was completed at the yards in Fondor. And this seems to line up with the number of 13 of these things being built total that I found through Google. Now, as mentioned previously, in the Disney Canon, there are only 6 named Executor-class ships. However, the Disney Canon lore does state that Alliance Intelligence estimates that as many as a dozen or so of these ships were built, which would again allow for roughly 13 vessels, provided Disney is indeed aiming for that number. However, again, it appears that the number 13 is broadly accepted, although I would like to caveat that the Nighthammer is not actually included on the wiki page for Executor-class ships, and I had to find that ship separately. It is entirely possible there are other such ships on the wiki that I am not aware of, both in the Disney Canon and the Expanded Universe. If you happen to find such a ship, by all means let me know, and I'll add it in as a note in this video. But until there is other information available, that remains the list of all of the known Executor-class ships that we have definitive histories of some kind for. This means that in total, if we combine the Disney Canon and the Expanded Universe, we have a definitive number of 29 with a possible 30th, again depending on whether or not the Megador is an Executor class or not. Personally, I think it's funny how often these ships seem to be undone by hyperdrive malfunctions, whether it's accidentally jumping into a black hole, or having rebels sabotage their hyperdrive engines so that they exit hyperspace in a place where they are incredibly vulnerable and able to be wiped out. It does go to show, however, these ships were incredibly powerful, and much more easily destroyed through subterfuge rather than open battle, with only a handful of them, such as the Lusancia, Ravager, and Reaper, actually going down in battle, versus being destroyed through underhanded means. At the end of the day, we see through the fact that subterfuge was more often than not the choice weapon to take out these warships. The Executor class remains one of the most powerful ships in Star Wars, both psychologically and in terms of actual armament that was ever built by any faction within the Star Wars universe. Alright everyone, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe. There'll be more content coming. If you've got any questions or comments, by all means leave them and I'll be responding to them shortly. Until next time, this is your host Slade, and this has been Star Wars Did You Know?